Shalom, Mashpaka. Shalom. Just making sure that my camera is on. Shalom. Shalom, Mashpaka. Shalom to the whole Bayif of Yashar'AL, all 12 tribes scattered worldwide, wherever your feet touch the soil on this yom. Shalom to the elder Ak, Yahudah. Shalom to the younger Ak, Ephraim. Shalom to the stranger, to the remnant of the sons of Adam, who having come out of paganism, whom having come out of darkness into the light of Yahuwah, having thrown down your idols, having been washed in the washing of the word, having been washed in the makuah tabalah, that is to say, falsely, the baptism, in the set-apart name, in the Kadush name of Yahushua HaMashiach, whereby now being engrafted into the vine, whereby being engrafted into the olive tree, whereby being re-engrafted into the tree of life, and whereby becoming adopted sons, and whereby becoming fellow partakers and fellow citizens, and fellow partakers of the everlasting covenant and the promise and inheritance that was given to Yashar'AL and to Yashar'AL alone. Shalom, shalom to you worldwide, wherever your feet touch the soil on this yom. Shalom, shalom to you worldwide. Mashpaka, Mashpaka, Mashpaka. I've come real briefly. I want to come to you real briefly to talk about a subject that has received a lot of attention here lately with the awakening of Yahuwah's people worldwide. This is a subject that has garnered a lot of attention, garnered a lot of anger, garnered a lot of hurt, and garnered a lot of dispute. Garnered a lot of dispute. And that subject has to do with mixed marriages and the question of whether or not are mixed marriages allowed in Yashar'AL. Are mixed marriages allowed in Yashar'AL? Now, this is a loaded question. It is a loaded question that we're going to allow Yahuwah to answer. I'm not going to answer anything. I'm not going to answer this question. Let's make that disclaimer. I'm not going to answer that question today, but Yahuwah is. Yahuwah is by the mouth of witnesses, by the mouth of two or more witnesses. Abba, Yahuwah, is going to establish this truth today, and line by line, precept upon precept. Indeed, we're going to discover this truth. We're going to discover this truth. So again, as a disclaimer, I'm only going to use the word of Yahuwah. Nothing else. I'm not going to use conjecture. I'm not going to use my personal opinion. I'm only going to use the word of Yahuwah and the word of Yahuwah alone. And so, listen, if something is said that you do not agree with, do not get angry with me. You get angry with Yahuwah, because I'm only going to use his word and his word alone. Nothing else. Again, no conjecture, not my personal opinion. I'm only going to use the word of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah is going to answer this question for himself. He is going to answer this question because indeed it is his word. It is his word. So the first precept we're going to look at comes from Dabarim, or commonly called Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 6. Beginning at verse 1, it reads, "When Yahuwah your Elohim brings you into the land which you go to possess, he shall also clear away many nations." Listen, many nations before you. The Kittites, or commonly called Hittites, the Girgashi, the Amorite. I need you to bookmark and underline these names. The Kitti, the Girgashi, and the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Perizzi, commonly called Perizzites, and Cuite, commonly called Hiwites, and Yabuzi, commonly called Yabuzites. 7 nations. How many? 7. 7. 7 nations greater and mightier than you. He names no other nations here. He names no other nations besides these 7. Let's establish that. This is what the text declares. He names no other nations besides these 7. Moreover, these 7 nations are all descendants from Ham. These 7 nations are all descendants from Canaan, commonly called Canaan. These 7 nations are all descended from Canaan, commonly called Canaan, who is the son of Ham, who was a son of Ham. And so all of these are Kami. Kami are commonly called Hamites. These are black people. These are all black people. 7 nations, all black people, all descendants of Ham, all descendants of Canaan, or Canaan, of Canaan. 7 nations, 7 nations. Reading on. And when Yahuwah your Elohim gives them over to you, you shall strike them and put them under the ban completely, which means to utterly destroy them, which means to utterly destroy these 7 nations. Make no covenant with them and show them no favor, and do not intermarry with them. With who? With these 7 nations. With these 7 nations. You do not give your daughter to his son, and you do not take his daughter for your son. For he turns your sons away from following me to serve other mighty ones. Who? These 7 nations, the sons of Ham, and by extension, the sons of Canaan, commonly called Canaan. Reading on. Then the displeasure of Yahuwah shall burn against you and promptly destroy you. But this is what you do to them. Break down their slaughter places, and smash their pillars, and cut down their asherim, and burn their carved images with fire. For you are a kadosh people to Yahuwah, a separate people to Yahuwah, your Elohim. Yahuwah, your Elohim, has chosen you to be a people for himself, a treasured possession above all the peoples on the face of the earth. So here it is established in Devarim 7 that Yahuwah restricted our people, or forbidded our people from intermarrying with these 7 nations. These 7 nations, indeed, the point has been made that these 7 nations were all descended from Ham. Indeed, these 7 nations were all descended by extension from Canaan, commonly called Canaan. Commonly called Canaan. And the point has been made that as these were descendants of Ham, these were black people. These were black people that Yahuwah did not want our ancestors to intermarry with. Now, we understand that by this text, he did not want us, and by other texts, by other precepts, that he did not want our ancestors to intermarry with these people because of the abominations that these people were doing in the land. And because Yahuwah did not want Yahuwah, by intermarrying with them, Yahuwah did not want their abominations to turn our hearts, the hearts of our ancestors, away from him. So I turn your attention to, again, he's speaking of 7 nations here. 7 nations. 7 nations of the sons of Ham. 7 nations, and by extension of the sons of Canaan, who was a son of Ham. Let's turn now to Ezra, another text that is used to defend Abba's so-called prohibition against us intermarrying with the nations. Again, Devarim, which is the text not my words, declares that our ancestors were not to intermingle with 7 nations, 7 specific nations. 7 specific nations in which the text is pointing out were all the sons of Ham. And by extension, the sons of Canaan are commonly called Canaan, who was and who is a son of Ham. So now let's look at Ezra, the 9th chapter, verse 1 through 15. Beginning at verse 1. And when these matters had been done, the leaders came to me, saying, the people of Yashar'AL and the Kohanim, commonly called priests, and the Luim, commonly called Levites, have not separated themselves from the peoples of the lands. Listen, this is very pivotal. According to their abominations. According to their abominations. Those of the Canaanite, they are named in Dabarim 7. The Kitti, they are named in Dabarim 7. The Perizzite, they are named in Dabarim 7, which is Torah. The Yabuzi, they are also named in Dabarim 7. They are also named in Dabarim 7 amongst the 7 nations that Yahuwah forbidded our ancestors from intermingling with, from intermarrying with. Listen, the Ammoni, they are not named in Dabarim 7. They are not named in Dabarim 7. The Ammoni are commonly called the Ammonites. The Moabite, which again, neither are they named in Dabarim 7 in the Torah. They are not named among the 7 nations. Neither the Ammonites or the Moabites are more properly called the Ammoni and the Moabite. Neither one of these nations, which are the children of Lot, and by extension the children of Abraham, neither one of these are mentioned in Dabarim 7. And this is why I brought your attention to where it says here, they haven't separated themselves from the people of the land according to their abominations. According to their abominations. And so the first 4 that were listed are part of the 7 nations that our people, that our ancestors were forbidden from intermarrying with. But now we find the Ammoni, who were not listed in Dabarim 7, and the Moabite, who also are not listed in Dabarim 7. The Mashra'i, indeed, Mashra'i, the Egyptians, the Mashra'i, the Mashraim, they too are not listed among the 7 nations in Dabarim 7. They too are not listed. And if there were a prohibition from marrying the Mashra'i, then Yahusuf, commonly called Joseph, could not have married Asenah. And Abraham would not have married Hagar if there were a prohibition against marrying Mashra'i. Yet we find here that Ezra has contention with our ancestors for having not separated themselves from the people of the land, and I draw your attention to according to their abominations. According to their abominations. So again, Mashraim is not one of the nations to be put under the ban, as Abba gives instructions in Dabarim 7. Mashraim was not one of those nations. Moab was not one of those nations, and neither was Ammon. None of these are listed in Dabarim 7 as the nations in which we're not to intermarry with. Yet we find them listed here, and the key here is, again, according the people had not separated themselves from the people according to their abominations. According to their abominations. And so we understand by this that this has to do with idolatry. This has to do with uncleanness, because neither Egypt or Mashra'i or Moab, or commonly called Moab, and Ammon, are more accurately called Ammon, are listed among the 7 nations in Dabarim 7, in which Yahuwah had given instructions to our ancestors to not intermingle with. And so this is why I brought your attention to the saying here, to the statement that they had not separated themselves from the people of the lands according to their abominations. And so we understand here that this has to do with idolatry. This has to do with idolatry. Indeed, again, if our ancestors were forbidden from intermarrying with the Egyptians, that would have been listed in Devarim 7. And if our people had been forbidden from intermarrying with the Egyptians and the Moabites and the Ammonites, then again, Abraham would not have been able to marry or intermarry with Hagar. Indeed, Torah is eternal. Torah is eternal. Even Abraham followed Torah. Even he followed Torah, yet he married Hagar. And Yahuseph would not have been able to marry Asenath. He would not have been able to marry Asenath. And the Yashar'Al, who is found in Torah, who had married the Egyptian man, whose son was stoned for blaspheming the name of Yahuwah in the wilderness, she would have not been able to intermingle or marry that Egyptian man. So you see, this had nothing to do, the reason that we find the Mashra'i added here, and the Moabite added here, and the Ammonite added here, because this has to do with idolatry. This has to do with idolatry because we find here that they had not separated themselves from the people of the land according to their abominations. This had to do with idolatry. This had to do with idolatry. Again, our people were not forbidden from marrying with or intermarrying with the Egyptians. As we find here in Devarim, the 23rd chapter, verse 3 through 6, it reads here, an Ammoni or a Moabite shall not enter the assembly of Yahuwah. Even a 10th generation of them shall not enter into the assembly of Yahuwah. So we can understand why the prohibition was spoken against, why Ezra had a problem with our people intermingling or intermarrying with the Moabite and the Ammoni, even though these two nations were not listed in the 7 nations above. We understand now by Devarim 23, reading starting at verse 3, we understand why he had a problem with them intermarrying with the Moabite and the Ammonite, because here in Devarim 23, beginning at verse 3, it reads, an Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter the assembly of Yahuwah. Even a 10th generation of them shall not enter into the assembly of Yahuwah. So we understand that. We understand that. That's understandable. Reading on, because they did not meet you with bread and water on the way when you came out of Mashraim, and because they hired against you Balaam, son of Baor, from Pathor of Aram, Naharaim, to curse you. But Yahuwah your Elohim refused to listen to Balaam, and Yahuwah your Elohim turned the curse into a barakah for you, because Yahuwah your Elohim loves you. Do not seek their shalom, nor their good, all your days forever. So we understand that. We understand that. We can understand Ezra's concern about the people having mingled with the Moabite and the Ammoni. Even though they were not listed in Devarim 7, we find them listed in Devarim 23. But it says here, they may not enter the assembly. There is no prohibition against them intermarrying with them. The prohibition was against those 7 nations. Against those 7 nations. There is no prohibition, however, against our ancestors intermarrying with the Moabite and the Ammonite. There is no prohibition. Indeed, there is no prohibition against our ancestors intermarrying with Egyptians, with Mashra'i. There is no prohibition. We find this here then, that because there is no prohibition with intermarrying with the Moabite, we find Ruth, the Moabitess, how she married Boaz. She intermarried with Boaz. And so had there been a prohibition, she would not have been to intermarried with Boaz, or commonly called Boaz. But we find Ruth, the Moabitess, intermarrying with Boaz, and between the two of them, Boaz fathered Abad. Abad, who is the father of Ishai, who is the father of Dawood, Malak Dawood. And so there was not a prohibition against the Moabite intermarrying with our people. The prohibition was that they could not come into the assembly of Yahuwah. They could not come into the assembly of Yahuwah. But what we find here with Ruth, is something very interesting, because Ruth spoke something very integral and very foundational when she was dealing with her mother-in-law, Naomi. She spoke when Naomi said, go back to your people and go back to your gods, go back to your mighty one. But Ruth declared, no, do not forbid me to go with you. I will go with you. Your people will be my people. Your Elohim will be my Elohim. Where you go, I go, and where you die, I die. And so Ruth made the declaration there that your people are going to become my people, that I want to be engrafted into your people, and I'm going to serve the same Elohim that your people serve. This is very foundational. This is very foundational. Very foundational. So we find here that even though Ezra had a problem with the people of the land intermingling with the Moabite and the Ammoni, and we find in Devarim 23 that they are never to come into the assembly, even down to the 10th generation, the Moabite and the Ammoni are to never come into the assembly of Yahuwah. We find Ruth coming into the assembly, having intermarried and having been engrafted into our people. Having been engrafted into our people, whereby now she is no longer a Moabitess. She is a fellow citizen. She is a Yashar'AL. But nevertheless, what about the Canaanite? They are listed. They are listed both in Devarim 7 and in Ezra chapter 9. The Canaanite are listed there. But what about Rahab? What about Rakab? She was a Canaanitess. What about her? She was a Canaanitess in the city of Yariku, commonly called Jericho. She was a Canaanitess who was delivered. And what we find with Rakab was that she then went on to marry Salmon. And between the two of them, they parented Boaz, who we just finished talking about. And so with this Canaanitess, who too accepted the Elohim of Yashar'AL and declared that your people are going to be my people, where you go, I go, where you and where you die, I die, and whereby she was no longer a Canaanitess, but she was a fellow Yashar'AL. You see, the engrafting started long ago. It started long ago, even in the Torah. Even in the Torah with our people in Exodus, Shamut, the 12th chapter, there was a mixed multitude that came out with our people. There was a mixed multitude. And those who took the circumcision and kept the ways of Yahuwah, they were considered as native born. They were considered as the native born, in which we have been commanded in, I believe it's Uyikra, the 19th chapter, to love them as we love ourselves, as fellow citizens, to love them as we love ourselves, because they are recognizing the same Yahuwah that we recognize, and they have submitted themselves to the same Torah that we are submitting ourselves to. For that matter, however, we're not done. For that matter, what about Uriah, commonly called Uriah, the Hittite, who was married to Bathsheba, whom Malak Dawood had killed so that he could have his wife, so that he could take his wife. Now, if the Hittites, indeed, along with the Canaanite, were one of the 7 nations that were to be put under the ban, that were to be utterly destroyed. But we find Uriah here having married a Yashar'Al in the person of Bathsheba. He had married her. Now, if it were an unclean thing for him to marry her, Malak Daoud wouldn't have taken her as wife. He wouldn't have taken her. You see, Uriah too had declared that Yahuwah was going to be his Elohim, and he was going to keep the instructions of Yahuwah, no different than the people of Yahuwah, whereby becoming engrafted into Yashar'AL, whereby becoming a fellow citizen, and whereby being treated no different than the native born. Whereby being treated no different than the native born. You see, the wives that Ezra was concerned with, the wives up above that Ezra was concerned with, were the wives that were still engaging in their pagan abominations, as it is written above in Ezra 9. And when these matters had been done, the leaders came to me, saying, the people of Yashar'AL and the Kahanim and the Luim have not separated themselves from the peoples of the land according to their abominations. According to their abominations. Indeed, if mixed marriages were forbidden, the Mashiach's birth would have been out of order. He is a descendant of Rachab and Salmon. Indeed, he is a descendant of Ruth, of a Moabitess. He is descendant of Rachab. And I bring your attention to Rachab because Rachab was not only a Canaanitess, but Rachab was a harlot. She was a prostitute. And through this line, we find the Hamashiach, because in this line, we find the line of Malak Daoud. We find the line of Malak Daoud. And so mixed marriages have never been forbidden in Yashar'AL. Mixed marriages have never been forbidden in Yashar'AL. However, there is a reason that he highlights those 7 nations. There is a reason that he highlights those particular 7 nations. Again, we see that a Moabitess and an Ammonite cannot enter the assembly of Yahuwah even down to the 10th generation. But how do we explain Ruth? How do we explain Ruth? And indeed, the Canaanite were to be put under the ban. But how do we explain Rachab? How do we explain Rachab? You see, this has to do with abominations. This has to do with idolatry. However, those 7 nations, there's a deeper significance to those 7 nations that were named that our people were forbidden from intermarrying with, and we're going to get into that. But I pray that Abba is showing you so far that this has to do with abominations. This has to do with the pagan practices of the nations that our people were going in to displace. This had to do with their pagan practices. This had to do with their abominations. Now, we're going to get a little bit deeper into this, but I want you to understand that the prohibition was against those 7 nations. Do not intermarry with those 7 nations. So looking deeper again here at Ezra 9, let's continue. Let's continue with Ezra 9. I am going to start with according to their abominations, those of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, and the Yabuzi, the Amorite, and the Moabite, the Mashri, the Mashraite, which is Egyptians, which is to say Egyptian, and the Amorite, and the Amorite. Now, the Amorite are one of those 7 nations. They are one of those 7 nations that the prohibition that the Torah declares that our ancestors were not to intermingle with. Now, again, I bring your attention to these are sons of Canaan, and by extension, these are sons of Cam. And so these were black people. The prohibition was against the sons of Cam, and by extension, the sons of Canaan. Reading on, for they have taken some of their daughters as wives for themselves and their sons, so that the Kadu seed is intermingled with the people of those lands. Here's another clue. Here's another clue where Yahuwah does not want what? His Kadu seed, his people, his Kadu seed mixing with that which is unclean. Mixing with the peoples of the land who are engaging in abominable practices. He does not want his Kadu seed mixing with the seed of Hashatan. He does not want his seed mixing with that which is unclean. We are a kadosh people, a separated people, and we are to remain clean and not mix with the unclean, so as our hearts are turned away from Yahuwah. So that our hearts are turned away from Yahuwah. Reading on. And the hand of the leaders and rulers has been foremost in this trespass. And when I heard this word, I tore my garment and my robe, and plucked out some of the hair of my head and beard, and sat down astonished. Then all those who trembled at the words of the Elohim of Yashar'AL gathered to me because of the trespass of the exiles. And I sat astonished until the evening offering. And at the evening offering I rose from my affliction, and having torn my garment and my robe, I fell on my knees and spread out my hands to Yahuwah my Elohim, and said, O my Elohim, I am too ashamed and wounded to lift up my face to you, my Elohim, for our crookedness have risen higher than our heads, and our guilt has grown up to the Shamayim. Since the days of our fathers to this day, we have been very guilty, and for our crookedness we are sovereigns, and our Kahanim have been given into the hand of the sovereigns of the lands, to the sword, to captivity, and to plunder, and to shame of faces, as it is to this day. But now, for a short while, favor has been shown from Yahuwah our Elohim, to leave us a remnant to escape, and to give us a peg in his kadosh place, that our Elohim might enlighten our eyes, and give us a little reviving in our bondage. For we were slaves, but in our bondage our Elohim did not forsake us, and extended loving commitment to us in the presence of the sovereign of Persia, to revive us, to raise up the house of our Elohim, to restore its ruins, and to give us a wall in Yehuda and Yerushalayim. And now, O our Elohim, what do we say after this? For we have forsaken your commands, which you have commanded by your servants, the Nabiim, which is to say prophets, saying, the land which you are going in to possess is a land unclean, through the uncleanness of the people of the land. Is a land unclean, through the uncleanness of the peoples of the land. You see, this is about uncleanness. This is about the abominable practices that the people were practicing. It's specifically amongst those seven nations. Specifically amongst those seven nations. But is that the only reason that Yahuwah did not want our ancestors intermingling with those specific seven nations? Let's continue to read. By their abominations, here we are again. The land which you are going in to possess is a land unclean, through the uncleanness of the peoples of the land, by their abominations which they have filled it. Indeed, these are the words of Ezra higher above in this text, when it declares that the people of the land had not separated themselves, that Yahuwah's people had not separated themselves from the people of the land according to their abominations. And so again, that shows us there that the wives that our ancestors had taken was still operating in their abominable acts. They were still operating in uncleanness. They were not like Ruth, who had forsaken her mighty ones and who had received the Elohim of Yashar'AL. They were not like Rahab, who had forsaken her harlotry and had forsaken the mighty ones of her people, and who had accepted the Elohim of Yashar'AL. They were not like them. They were still operating in their uncleanness. And thus, Ezra tore his clothes, because nothing unclean can enter into the presence of Yahuwah, and they had not separated themselves from these people who were still operating in uncleanness. They were still operating in abominations. And this is why Ezra tore his clothes. Indeed, again, in those nations mentioned, what a Mashra'i. What a Mashra'i. There is no prohibition against intermarrying with the Mashra'i. Indeed, included amongst those people were the Moabi and the Ammoni. There is no prohibition against intermarrying with them. There is a commandment in Dabarim 23 that the Moabi and the Amari are not to come within the assembly of Yashar'AL, even to the 10th generation. But again, how do you explain Ruth? She came into the assembly. She came into the assembly. Indeed, she, before Boaz married her, she was found gleaning in the fields as a stranger. She was found gleaning in the fields. Indeed, you've got to use discernment, and you've got to understand what Yahuwah is trying to show us here. He wants us to make a distinction between the clean and the unclean, and he doesn't want us intermingling with that which is unclean, with those who are still operating in abominations and those who are still operating in uncleanness. And indeed, I draw your attention back to the fact that those 7 nations were all children of Ham, and by extension, children of Canaan. They were Kami. They were black folk. They were black folk. They were black folk. But there was a specific reason, indeed, that Abba did not want our ancestors intermingling with them. Indeed, it had to do with their abominations. Indeed, it had to do with their abominations. But the Yashar'AL also practiced abominations. They also practiced abominations. But we find Yahusuf marrying Asenath. We find Abraham marrying Hagar. Indeed. We find Boaz marrying Ruth. And so the Yashar'AL also practiced abominations, but there was no prohibition against intermarrying with them. So that begs the question, was the reason that Yahuwah spoke a prohibition against our ancestors marrying, intermingling with those 7 nations? Was it because they were practicing was it for the reason only that they were practicing abominations, or was there another reason? Because indeed, he only mentions these seven nations. There are 70 nations on the horizon. There are 70 nations on the horizon. You mean to tell me that only these 7 nations were practicing abominations? I pray that you understand that they were not. That there had to be some other reason. There had to be some other reason. The Philistines also practiced abominations, but there was no prohibition against them. The Assyrians also practiced abominations, but there was no prohibition against them. There was no prohibition against them. The Persians also practiced abominations, but there was no prohibition against them. Indeed, Hadassah married the sovereign of Persia. She married the sovereign of Parash and became a sovereigness. So that should beg the question, what was it about those 7 nations that caused Yahuwah to declare, I don't want you intermarrying with those 7 nations, with those specific 7 nations? Was it simply because of the abominations that they were practicing? Indeed, I just told you that all those other nations were also practicing abominations, yet there were no prohibitions against intermarrying with them. Let's look deeper. And now, O our Elohim, what do we say after this? For we have forsaken your commands, which you have commanded by your servants the Nabiim, saying, the land which you are going into possess is a land unclean through the uncleanness of the people of the lands. Through the uncleanness of the people of the lands, by their abominations, which they have filled from one end to another, by their uncleanness. And now, do not give your daughter as wives for their sons, nor take their daughters to your sons. Indeed, again, when this was spoken in the Torah, and now Ezra is quoting the Torah here. He is quoting the Torah. He is quoting Devarim 7. He is quoting the Torah, which specifically outlines 7 nations. The Moabi are not listed there. The Ammoni are not listed there. The Yashar'AL are not listed there. Yet, Ezra is quoting Torah here. He is quoting Torah here. This should tell you that his problem here in Ezra 9 was that they had intermarried with the people of the land, and the people of the land had not put away their abominations, and they had not put away the people. They had not put away their wives, who were continuing to practice these abominations. This was the problem. This was the issue. And now, do not give your daughters as wives for their sons, nor take their daughters to your sons. And do not seek their shalom or wealth ever, so that you are strong, and shall eat the good of the land, and leave it as an inheritance to your children forever. And after all that has come upon us for our evil deeds, and for our great guilt, since you, our Elohim, have held back the rod upon our crookedness, and have given us such deliverance as this, should we turn back to break your commands, and join in marriage with the people of these abominations? With these abominations, this is what it's about. Abominations. Abominations. Joining ourselves with that which is unclean. Joining his Kadu seed with that which is unclean. With people who are practicing abomination. With people who are practicing uncleanness. But again, he specifically mentions 7 nations in Devarim 7. And he specifically in Devarim 7 declares, don't intermarry with them, lest they turn the hearts of your son, the hearts of your daughters, as to their pagan abominable practices, and turn your hearts away from me. But again, were they the only ones on the face of this flat plain earth practicing abominations? No, we've already made that point. That point has already been established. But our people were not forbidden from intermarrying with them, with the rest of the nations. So, was it merely because these people, these 7 nations, I keep having to harp on these 7 nations, was it merely because these 7 nations were practicing abominations, or was it something else also? Or was it something else also? Let's continue to read. Would you not be enraged with us until you had consumed us, so that there would be no remnant or survivor? O Yahuwah Elohim of Yashar'AL, you are righteous, for we are left as a remnant, as it is this day. See, we are before you in our guilt, for there is no one to stand before you concerning this. There is no one to stand before you concerning this. Now, again, the point has already been made that the prohibition, that the restriction to intermarry was limited to 7 nations. That's the text. Don't get mad at me. That's what the text says. Do not intermarry with those 7 nations. Now, don't enter conjecturing. We're commanded not to add to the word and not to take away from it. And so don't add to it. It declares those 7 nations. Those 7 nations. And indeed, in Ezra 9, or Ezra 9, it includes the Mashra'i, or commonly called Egyptians, and it also includes the Moabi and the Ammoni. So now let's take a look at Devarim, Deuteronomy 23, verse 7 through 8. Beginning at verse 7, it reads here, do not loathe an Edomite. Do not loathe an Edomite. Do not loathe an Edomite. By the way, not all white people are Edomites. That's foolishness. Not all white people are Edomites. For he is your brother. Listen, do not loathe a Mashra'i, or commonly called Egyptian, because you are a stranger in his land. The children of the 3rd generation born to them do enter the assembly of Yahuwah. The children of the 3rd generation born to them do enter the assembly of Yahuwah. Do enter the assembly of Yahuwah. So there was no prohibition against intermarrying with them. There was no prohibition against intermarrying with them. The Mashra'i that the people of the land had intermarried with in Ezra, the 9th chapter, was still practicing their abominations. As it reads, the people have intermingled with the people of the land as to their abominations. So the people had not separated themselves from their abominations, and those abominations had turned the people, had turned their hearts from Yahuwah to the abominations of the people. And this is the very reason that Yahuwah has declared not to intermingle with those who are practicing abominations and uncleanness, so that you too practice these unclean ways, and so that your heart is turned from me. It's turned from me. But I pose the question. Was that the only reason that the prohibition was issued in Torah not to intermarry with those 7 nations? Because again, there were other nations that were doing abominable things. All nations outside of Yashar'AL, because Yashar'AL was the only nation in whom Torah was given to. And so all nations, including Babylon, in which we find our people in Ezra 9 had just come out of Babylonian and Persian captivity. They practiced abominable things, but there was no prohibition against intermarrying with them. So that begs the question, if whether or not that was the only reason that Abba issued the prohibition not to intermarry with those 7 specific nations. So we see again that there was no prohibition against intermarrying with Egyptians, with Yisrael. Yet we find them listed in Ezra chapter 9. Why? Because they had not separated themselves from their abominations. Moreover, we find here in Yashar'AL, or Ishayahu, or commonly called Isaiah, the 19th chapter, verse 24 through 25, we find here, in that day Yashar'AL shall be one of 3 with Misraim, with Egypt, and Ashur. And Ashur, indeed, there's no prohibition against intermarrying with the Ashurians. They too were a barbaric, abominable people, but there is no prohibition against intermarrying with them. Listen, in that day Yashar'AL shall be one of 3 with Misraim and Ashur, even a barakah in the midst of the earth, whom Yahuwah of hosts shall barak, saying, Baruch, listen, saying, Baruch is Misraim, my people. Baruch is Misraim, my people. Baruch is Egypt, my people. Yet we find Egyptians, Misraim, listed in Ezra 9. It had to do with them continuing to practice abominable things, continuing to practice uncleanness. That's what it had to do with. It had to do with nothing else. They were continuing to practice uncleanness. Listen, Baruch is Misraim, my people, and Ashur the work of my hands, and Yashar'AL my inheritance. And so we find here, Adib Mashpaka, that Ezra 9, or Ezra 9, has to do with the people who did not do away with their abominations. They had not done away with their abominations. And again, Yahusuf married an Egyptian, a Mashra'i. And both he and both of his sons then are mixed. Both Ephraim and Manasseh, they're mixed. They are mixed. Yet we find with Ephraim received the firstborn Barakah. He received the very name of his grandfather, Yashar'AL, but he was mixed. He was mixed. Ephraim was mixed. Ephraim, the firstborn son, was mixed. Indeed, he's still mixed because he is mixed and mingled with all nations. He has become the completion of the nations. And Ephraim has become a coat of many colors. He has many skin complexions and many hair textures because he has become the completeness of the nations. Ephraim was mixed. He had an Egyptian mother. It had nothing to do with her being Egyptian in Ezra 9. It had to do with the people practicing their abominations. This means, indeed, that Ephraim, who was mixed, who carries the name of his grandfather, Yashar'AL, is descended from a mixed marriage. He is descended from a mixed marriage. He is descended from a mother who was an Egyptian, who was a Kami, descended from Kam, and a Yashar'AL father. He was mixed. And his descendants are mixed because he was mixed. And so now, in accordance with Bereshit, Genesis, the 48th chapter and the 19th verse, we find him scattered amongst the nations even to this day, where it says that he was going to become the completeness of the nations. Ephraim has become every nation. He is mixed and mingled with every nation under the sun, and he has become every nation. He has become every tribe, tongue, color, and language. Yes, he has. Yes, he has. Every different, he is many different skin tones, many different pigmentation, skin pigmentation, and many different hair textures. Oh, yes, he is. Yes, he is. But this had nothing to do with them mixing with Egyptians because of their race in Ezra 9. That had to do with them practicing abominations. Nevertheless, moreover, Yahushua, husband of Maryam, was commanded to take the infant Mashiach to Egypt, to Mashraim, in order to hide him from Herod. Why would the Mashiach himself go to a people whom we are forbidden from mixing with to hide? Why? Because we ain't forbidden from mixing with them. And so don't misinterpret Ezra 9. That had to do with abominations. That had to do with abominations. Nevertheless, let's go back to those 7 nations. To those 7 nations in which our ancestors were forbidden from intermarrying with. Let's go back to those 7 nations that our ancestors were forbidden from intermarrying with. Let's get to the root of that. Again, I asked the question, was it simply because they were practicing or engaging in abominable practices? If that were the case, our people couldn't have intermarried with any of the people of the Arats. They wouldn't have been able to intermarry with any of the people of the Arats because all of the nations were abominable. The Torah, indeed, was only given to Yashar'AL. And so we as a nation whom the Torah was given to was supposed to, and we still are supposed to, bring the Torah, bring the light to the nations in order to bring them out of darkness into the marvelous light of Torah. So all of the nations were abominable. But yet he specifically earmarked and identified 7 nations in which our ancestors were not to intermarry with. Why? 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 That is the question. That is the question. To get to the answer of that question, let's turn to the so-called apocryphal or the hidden books. Let's go to the so-called apocryphal books, the so-called hidden books. Let me pull it up. And we're going to look to the book of Jubilees, the book of Jubilees. And we're going to read it starting at the 8th chapter. And we're going to read through chapter 10. We may read through chapter 10. I believe we're going to read through chapter 10. We're going to begin at verse 8, chapter 8 of the book of Jubilees, or the book of Jubilees. Excuse me. Beginning at verse 1 of Jubilees, or Jubilees, chapter 8, it reads, "And the 29th Jubilee, and the first week, and the beginning thereof, Arpachshad took to himself a woman, and her name was Razu'ayah, the daughter of Shushan, the daughter of Ailam. And she bore him a son in the 3rd year in this week, and he called his name Cainam. And the son grew, and his father taught him writing, and he went to seek for himself a place where he might seize for himself a city. And he found a writing which former generations had carved on the rock, and he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it and committed crime owing to it, for it contained the teaching of the watchers, in accordance with which they used to observe the omens of the sun and moon and stars and all the signs of Shamma'im. And he wrote it down and said nothing regarding it, for he was afraid to speak to Nuach about it, lest he should be angry with him on account of it. And in the 30th Jubilee, in the 2nd week, in the 1st year thereof, he took to himself a woman, and her name was Malka, the daughter of Madai, the son of Yaphath. And in the 4th year he begot a son, and called his name Shalach, for he said, Truly I have been sent. And in the 4th year he was born, and Shalach grew up and took to himself a woman, and her name was Muach, the daughter of Kasad, his father's brother, in the 31st Jubilee, in the 5th week, in the 1st year thereof. And she bore him a son in the 5th year thereof, and he called his name Abba. And he took unto himself a woman, and her name was Azurah, the daughter of Nabrud, in the 32nd Jubilee, in the 7th week, in the 3rd year thereof. And in the 6th year thereof, she bore him a son, and he called his name Pelag. For in the days when he was born, the children of Nuach began to divide the earth amongst themselves. The children of Nuach began to divide the earth amongst themselves. For this reason, he called his name Pelag. And they divided it secretly amongst themselves, and told it to Nuach. Listen. And it came to pass in the beginning of the 33rd Jubilee that they divided the earth into 3 parts, for Sham and Cam and Yaphat, according to the inheritance of each. And the 1st year, in the 1st week, when one of us who had been sent was with them, one of us being the messengers, the Malachim. Malachim was here talking to Masha, as this was being recanted to Masha through a Malach, a messenger, and Masha wrote it down. Verse 11. And he called his sons, and they drew nigh to him, they and their children. And he divided the earth into the lots, which his 3 sons were to take in possession. And they reached forth their hands, and took the writing out of the bosom of Nuach their father. And there came forth on the writing as Sham's lot, the middle of the earth, which he should take as an inheritance for himself and for his sons, for the generations of eternity. We understand that Mount Zion, the true location of Mount Zion, is in the middle of the earth, which has been given to Sham's descendants. From the middle of the mountain range, of Rapha, from the mouth of the water, from the river Tina. And his portion goes towards the west, toward the midst of this river, and it extends till it reaches the water of the abyss, out of which this river goes forth, and pours its waters into the sea Ma'at. And this river flows into the great sea. And all that is towards the north is Yaphat's, all the cold lands. And all that is toward the north is Yaphat's, and all that is toward the Negab belongs to Sham. And it extends till it reaches Karasu. This is in the bosom of the tongue which looks towards the Negab. And this portion extends along the great sea, and it extends in a straight line till it reaches the west of the tongue which looks toward the Negab, for this sea is named for the tongue of the Mashra'i Sea. And it turns from there towards the Negab, towards the mouth of the great sea, on the shore of its waters, and it extends to the west to Afra, and it extends till it reaches the waters of the river Gihon, and to the south of the waters of Gihon, to the banks of this river. And it extends towards the east till it reaches the garden of Adam, to the south thereof, to the south and from the east of the whole land of the Adam and of the whole east. It turns to the east and proceeds till it reaches the east of the mountain named Rapha, and it descends to the bank of the mouth of the river Tina. This portion came forth by lot for Sham and his sons, that they should possess it forever unto his generations forever. And Nuach celebrated that this portion came forth for Sham and for his sons, and he remembered all that he had spoken with his mouth in Nabuah, which is to say prophecy. For he had said, Baruch be Yahuwah Elohim of Sham, and may Yahuwah dwell in the dwelling of Sham. And he knew that the garden of Adam is the Kadush Kadashim, which is to say the most separated place, and the dwelling of Yahuwah, and Mount Ginai, the center of the desert. That is Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, listen, the center of the navel of the earth. This was spoken to you earlier, that the true Mount Zion is in the center of the earth. These 3 were created as Kadush places facing each other. And he Baruch the Elohim of Elohim, who had put the word of Yahuwah into his mouth, and Yahuwah forevermore. And he knew that a Baruch portion And a barakah had come to Shem and his sons unto the generations forever, the whole land of Adon, the whole land of Adon. Indeed, the land of Adon, Eden, belongs to the children of Shem. Indeed, only Yashar'AL is going to enter therein. There are only 12 gates. There are only 12 gates. Only Yashar'AL are going to enter therein. And those who are joined to Yashar'AL, whereby becoming fellow citizens through the Hamashiach, whereby becoming adopted sons, and whereby becoming fellow partakers of the covenant and promise and inheritance that was given only to Yashar'AL. And the whole land of the Red Sea, and the whole land of the east and India, and on the Red Sea and the mountains thereof, and all the land of Bashan, and all the land of Lebanon, and the islands of Kaftor, and all the mountains of Sinir, and Amanah, and the mountains of Ashur, and the north, and all the land of Elam, Ashur, and Babal, and Shushan, and Madai, and all the mountains of Araat, and all the region beyond the sea, which is beyond the mountains of Ashur, towards the north, a Baruch and spacious land, and all that is in it is very good. And for Kam, commonly called Ham, came forth the second portion, beyond the Gikun, towards the south to the right of the garden, and it extends toward the south, and it extends to all the mountains of fire, and it extends toward the west to the sea of Atal, and it extends toward the west till it reaches the sea of Ma'uk, that sea into which everything which is not destroyed descends. And it goes forth towards the north to the limits of Gadir, and it goes forth to the coast of the waters of the sea, to the waters of the great sea, till it draws near to the river Yaikun, and goes along the river Yaikun, till it reaches the right of the garden of Adon. And this is the land which came forth for Kam, as the portion which he was to occupy forever, for himself and his sons, until their generations forever. And for Japheth came forth the third portion, beyond the river Tina, to the north of the outflow of the waters, and it extends northeasterly to the whole region of Gug, and to all the country east thereof. And it extends northerly to the north, and it extends to the mountains of Kot towards the north, and towards the sea of Ma'uk, and it goes forth to the east of Gadir, as far as the region of the waters of the sea. And it extends until it approaches the west of Farah, and it returns toward Apharak, and it extends easterly to the waters of the sea of Ma'at. And it extends to the region of the river Tina, and in a northeasterly direction, until it approaches the boundary of its waters toward the mountain Rapha, and it turns round towards the north. This is the land which came forth for Japheth and his sons as the portion of his inheritance, which he should possess for himself and his sons for their generations forever. Aulam, 5 great islands and a great land in the north. But it is cold, and the land of Kam is hot, and the land of Sham is neither hot nor cold, but it is of a blended cold and heat. Barak Yahuwah. Chapter 9. And Kam divided amongst his sons, and the first portion came forth for Cush, towards the east, and to the west of him for Mashraim, and to the west of him for Put, and to the west of him and to the west thereof on the sea for Canaan. Canaan. And Sham also divided amongst his sons, and the first portion came forth to Elam and his sons, to the east of the river Giddikal, to Sidikal, till it approaches the east, to the whole land of India, and on the Red Sea on its coast, and the waters of Dadan, and all the mountains of Mabri, and Elam, and all the land of Shushan, and all that is on the side of Farnak, to the Red Sea and the river Tina. And for Ashur came forth his second portion, all the land of Ashur, and Nineveh, and Shinar, and to the border of India, and it ascends and skirts to the river. And for Apatskad came forth the third portion, all the land of the region of the Kasdiim, to the east of the Parath, bordering on the Red Sea, and all the waters of the desert close to the tongue of the sea, which looks towards Mashraim. All the land of Labanun, and Sinir, and Amanah, to the border of Parath. And for Aram there came forth the fourth portion, all the land of Aram, Naharaim, between the Kidikal and the Parath, to the north of the Kasdiim, to the border of the mountains of Ashur, and the lands of Araat. And there came forth for Ludi, the fifth portion, the mountains of Ashur, and all appertaining to them, till it reaches the great sea, and till it reaches the east of Ashur, his brother. And Yaphat also divided the land of his inheritance amongst his sons. And the first portion came forth for Gemar, to the east from the north side to the river Tina. And in the north there came forth for Magog, all the inner portion of the north, until it reaches to the sea of Ma'at. And for Madai came forth as his portion, that he should possess from the west of his two brothers to the islands, and to the coast of the islands. And for Yuan came forth the fourth portion, every island, and the islands which are towards the border of Ludi. And for Tubal there came forth the fifth portion, in the midst of the tongue which approaches towards the border of the portion of Ludi, to the second tongue, to the region beyond the second tongue, unto the third tongue. And for Mashach came forth the sixth portion, all the region beyond the third tongue, till it approaches the east of Gadir. And for Terak there came forth the seventh portion, four great islands in the midst of the sea, which reached to the portion of Kam. And the islands of Kamatori came out by lot for the sons of Arpachshad as his inheritance. And thus the sons of Nuach divided unto their sons in the presence of Nuach their father, and he bound them by an oath. And he bound them all by an oath, imprecating a curse on everyone that sought to seize the portion which had not fallen to him by his lot. I'm going to read verse 14 again. And thus the sons of Nuach divided unto their sons in the presence of Nuach their father, and he bound them all by an oath, imprecating a curse on everyone that sought to seize the portion which had not fallen to him by his lot. And they all said, so be it for themselves and their sons, forever, throughout their generation, to the day of judgment, on which Yahuwah Elohim shall judge them with a sword and with fire, for all the unclean wickedness of their errors, wherewith they have filled the earth, with the transgression and uncleanness and fornication and crime. Chapter 10. Jubilees, chapter 10. And in the third week of this Jubilee, the unclean devils began to lead astray the children of the sons of Nuach, and to make to err and to destroy them. And the sons of Nuach came to Nuach their father, and they told him concerning the devils which were leading astray and blinding and slaying his sons' sons. And he prayed before Yahuwah forgive me, my spraka. I'm reading from the Safar, and some of these words are just not accurate. Let me read it. Let me read it correctly. And he prayed before Yahuwah Elohim, and said, Elohim of the Ruach of all flesh, who has shown compassion unto me, and has saved me and my sons from the waters of the flood, and has not caused me to perish as you did the sons of perdition. For your favor has been great towards me, and great has been your compassion to my soul. let your favor be lift up upon my sons, and let not wicked Ruach rule over them, lest they should destroy them from the earth. But do you barak me and my sons, and we may increase and multiply and replenish the earth. And you know how your watchers, the fathers of these Ruach, acted in my day. And as for these Ruach, which are lying, imprison them, and hold them fast in the place of condemnation. And let them not bring destruction on the sons of your servant, my Elohim, for these are malignant and created in order to destroy. And let them not rule over the Ruach of the living, for you alone can exercise dominion over them. And let them not have power over the sons of the righteous from henceforth and forevermore. And YAHUAH Eloheinu, bade us to bind all. And the chief of the Ruach, Mastama, came and said, Yahuwah Creator, let some of them remain before me, and let them hearken to my voice, and do all that I shall say unto them. For if some of them are not left to me, I shall not be able to execute the power of my will on the sons of men. For these are for corruption and leading astray before my judgment, for great is the wickedness of the sons of men. And he said, let the 10th part of them remain before him, and let 9 parts descend into the place of condemnation. And one of us he commanded that we should teach Nuach all their medicines, for he knew that they would not walk in uprightness, nor strive in righteousness. I'm not going to address that because the video is not, this teaching is not about that, so I'm not going to even talk about that. That's very significant, especially in this end times. That's very significant, but I'm not going to address it today. Verse 11. And we did according to all his words. All the malignant evil ones we bound in the place of condemnation, and a 10th part of them we left that they might be subject before Satan on the earth. And we explained to Nuach all the medicines of their diseases, together with their seductions, how he might heal them with herbs of the earth. And Nuach wrote down all things in a sephar, as we instructed him concerning every kind of medicine. Thus the evil Ruach were precluded from hurting the sons of Nuach. And he gave all that he had written to Sham, his eldest son, for he loved him exceedingly above all his sons. And Nuach slept with his fathers, and was buried on Mount Lubar, in the land of Ararat. 950 years he completed in his life, 19 jubilees in 2 weeks and 5 years. And in his life on earth, he excelled the children of men, save Canuk, commonly called Enoch, because of the righteousness wherein he was perfect. For Canuk's office was ordained for a testimony to the generations of the world, so that he should recount all the deeds of generation to generation to the day of judgment. And in the 33rd Jubilee, in the first year, in the 2nd week, Peleg took for himself a woman, whose name was Lumna, the daughter of Sinaa. And she bore him a son in the 4th year of this week. And he called his name Ra'u. For he said, behold, the children of men have become evil through the wicked purpose of building for themselves a city and a tower in the land of Shinar. For they departed from the land of Ararat eastward to Shinar, for in his days they built the city and the tower, saying, go to, let us ascend thereby into Shamaim. And they began to build, and in the 4th week they made brick with fire, and the brick served them for stone, and the clay with which they cemented them together with asphalt, which comes out of the sea, and out of the fountains of water in the land of Shinar. And they built it 40 years. Were they building it? Its breadth was 203 bricks, and the height of a brick was the third of one. Its height amounted to 5,433 cubits and 2 palms. And the extent of one wall was 13 stadies, and of the other 30 stadies. And YAHUAH Eloheinu said unto us, behold, they are one people, and this they began to do, and now nothing will be withheld from them. Go to, let us go down, and confound their language. Go to, let us go down and confound their language. He's talking here to the Malachim, that they may not understand one another's speech, and they may be dispersed into cities and nations. One purpose will no longer abide with them to the day of judgment. And Yahuwah descended, and we descended with him to see the city and the tower which the children of men had built. And he confounded their language, and they no longer understood one another's speech, and they ceased then to build the city and the tower. For this reason, the whole land of Shinar is called Babal, because Yahuwah did there confound all the language of the children of men, and from thence they were dispersed into their cities, each according to his language and his nation. And Yahuwah sent a mighty wind against the tower, and overthrew it unto the earth upon the earth. And behold, it was between Ashur and Babal in the land of Shinar, and they called this name Overthrow. In the 4th week, in the 1st year, in the beginning thereof, in the 34th of Jubilee, were they dispersed from the land of Shinar. Listen, and Cam and his sons went into the land which he was to occupy, which he acquired as his portion in the land of the south, in which they had entered into an oath. Each they had entered into an oath after the earth was divided between the 3 sons of Nuach. They had entered into an oath that they were going to stay within their own boundaries, and that if anyone left the boundaries in which they had entered into an oath to stay within, then that person would become cursed. That person would be cursed as spoken by the mouth of Nuach. Listen, and Canaan saw the land of Labanun, to the river of Mashraim, that it was very good. And he went not into the land of his inheritance, to the west, that is, to the sea. And he dwelt in the land of Labanun, eastward and westward, from the border of the Yarden, from the border of the sea. And Cam, his father, and Cush, and Mashraim, his brothers, said unto him, You have settled in a land which is not yours, and which did not fall to us by lot. Do not do so, for if you do so, you and your sons will fall in the land and be accursed through sedition. For by sedition you have settled, and by sedition will your children fall, and you shall be rooted out forever. And you shall be rooted out forever. Dwell not in the dwelling of Sham. Dwell not in the dwelling of Sham, for to Sham and to his sons did it come by their lot. So you see, this is why those 7 nations were put under the ban, because they were cursed. They were cursed. And this is why our ancestors were forbidden from intermarrying with those 7 nations, because they were cursed, because they had settled in a land that was not theirs. They were the sons of Cam, and that land was given to the sons of Sham. And they had settled there, and whereby acquired a curse. And whereby, because they had acquired a curse, they were put under the ban. And Yahuwah issued the declaration, the proclamation, that our people was not to intermarry with them. It was not simply because they were practicing abominations, because indeed everybody else was practicing abominations. But our ancestors were forbidden from intermarrying with those 7 nations, because they had settled in a land that was not theirs, and whereby a curse was pronounced upon them, as we read in Jubilees, the 8th chapter. Reading on, dwell not in the dwelling of Sham, for to Sham and to his sons did it come by their lot. Cursed are you, and cursed shall you be beyond all the sons of Nuach, by the curse by which we bound ourselves by an oath, in the presence of the Kadush judge, and in the presence of Nuach and our father. But he did not hearken unto them, and dwelt in the land of Labanun, from Kamath to the entering of Mashraim, he and his sons until this day. And for this reason, the land is named Canaan, or Canaan. The land is named Canaan, or Canaan. And this is why they were put under the ban. They were marked for destruction. And this is why Yahuwah forbid our ancestors from intermarrying with those 7 nations. And Japheth and his sons also went towards the sea, and dwelt in the land of their portion. And Madai saw the land of the sea, and it did not please him. And he begged a portion from Elam and Ashur and Arpachshad, his woman's brother. And he dwelt in the land of Madai, near to his woman's brother unto this day, because he intermarried. He intermarried, so he was allowed to stay. And he called his dwelling place and the dwelling place of his sons Madai, after the name of their father Madai. These are, in other words, the Medes and the Persians, because this is why we find the Medes who were descended from Yaphat in agreement with the Parash, or the Persians, who were sons of Sham. This is why we find the second beast, the Medo-Persia. This is where this alliance comes from. Nevertheless, I pray you understand now why our ancestors were forbidden from intermarrying with those 7 nations. They weren't forbidden from intermarrying with anyone else. They were forbidden from intermarrying with those 7 nations, and it wasn't entirely because they were practicing abominations, because every other nation was practicing abominations, inclusive of Yashar'AL, but it was because they were cursed. The people were cursed because they had settled in a land that was not theirs. The earth had been divided upon the 3 sons of Noah, and Canaan had settled in a land that was not his. All those 7 nations, again, were children of Ham, and by extension, they were descended from Canaan. And so we find a precept of that in Bereshith of Genesis, the 9th chapter. I'm going to read verse 20 through 26. Reading here, and Noah, a man of the soil, began and planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine and was drunk, and became uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan. Why did he mention Canaan? We just read. We understand why Canaan is mentioned here. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his 2 brothers. Ham saw the nakedness. Canaan didn't see it. Ham saw the nakedness, not Canaan. So, and Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his 2 brothers outside. So Sham and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and went backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. But their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. And Noah awoke from his wine, and he knew which his younger son had done to him. And he said, cursed not to come. Cursed not Ham. He didn't curse Ham. He cursed his son, Canaan, because he was speaking here prophetically. He was speaking Nabuah. This is Nabuah. These are the words of Yahuwah being spoken through Noah, because Yahuwah already knew that Canaan was not going to stay in the land that was apportioned to him, but that he was going to enter into the land of that was apportioned for Sham, and whereby he was going to become accursed. And because he had become accursed, he had to be uprooted. He and his ancestors, his children, had to be uprooted from the land, and they were to be put under the ban, and our ancestors were not to intermingle with them, not specifically for the abominations. That was one reason. But the other reason was because they were put under the ban. They were cursed. Indeed, again, all other nations were doing abominable things, but our ancestors were not forbidden from marrying them. They were forbidden from marrying within these specific 7 nations. Cursed is Canaan. Let him become a servant of servants to his brothers. And he said, Baruch be Yahuwah, the Elohim of Sham, and let Canaan become his servant. Let Canaan, or Canaan, become his servant. And so again, it wasn't that those nations weren't wicked. Those 7 nations weren't wicked, because they were. But it was also because they were cursed. There were and are other nations who were also wicked. There are other nations who are also wicked. Indeed, all other nations were wicked. All other nations were Torahless. They were also doing abominations. All other nations were also doing abominations, but our people were not forbidden from intermarrying with them. They were only forbidden from intermarrying with these 7 nations which were and have been put under the ban. which were and are have been put under the ban. But again, indeed, I bring your attention again to Rahab, who was a Canaanitess, who intermarried with Yashar'AL, and who ended up marrying Salmon, and they ended up bringing forth Boaz. But she had forsaken her abominations. She had thrown down her abominations and accepted the Elohim of Yashar'AL and accepted his Torah. Whereby being engrafted in and whereby becoming a fellow citizen. So again, there were and are other nations who were also wicked, but it had nothing to do with color. It had absolutely nothing to do with color. As pointed out, those 7 nations were black. They were black. Those 7 nations were black. Were black folk. They were black folk. And so it had nothing to do with color or race. Nothing to do with color or race. Indeed, race is an invented thing. It wasn't invented until the 1700s by a man named Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, who was a Freemason. He invented race. This is a thing of Hashatan. He invented race where he divided mankind up into 3 categories: Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid. He did this. A man did this. Abba Yahuwah cares nothing about race. He cares about the clean and the unclean, period. The clean and the unclean, period. He doesn't want his kadush seed, his clean seed, mixing with that which is unclean, irrespective of what color they are. There are black heathen. There are white heathen. There are brown heathen, red heathen, purple heathen. There are heathen of all different colors, tribes, and creeds. It has nothing to do with color. It has everything to do with whether or not this person is keeping the Torah of Yahuwah and has the witness of Yahushua HaMashiach. He does not want us intermingling with the heathen. It ain't got nothing to do with race. Nothing to do with race. If it had anything to do with race, then why did he forbid our people from intermarrying with those 7 nations who were 7 black nations? It had, 1, to do with the abominations that they were practicing, and 2, because they were put under the ban, because they were cursed, because they settled in a land that was not theirs. They settled in a land that was not theirs. And so before Johann here, there was no such thing as race. There was no such thing as race. You see, Yahuwah doesn't see race. He doesn't see colors. He sees nations, tribes, and tongues. He sees the heart, not color. He sees those who are obedient to him. He sees the sons of Adam, his firstborn son, Adam. He sees those who are obedient to him. He loves those who are obedient to him. He shows favor to those who are obedient to him, irrespective of color, tongue, or nation. Besides all that, the irony in this thing, Yashar'AL, we're a very fruitful people. We're very fruitful. We love being fruitful. And we've been scattered to all nations, to every single nation, both Yahudah and Ephraim. We have been scattered to every nation under the sun, and you better believe that us being a fruitful people, we love being fruitful. We have mixed and mingled with all nations, and and our family members now cannot now be determined by the color of their skin. We must observe their fruit. And so if you are spreading this false doctrine about not mixing with the nations, you're false. You're false, and you're not speaking the truth. You're speaking somewhat truth. If that person of the nations is not following the Torah of Yahuwah, then we're not to mix with them. We're not to intermarry with them. And irrespective of whether or not that person is black or white or brown, it matters not what color they are. If that person is walking in Torahlessness, then Yahuwah does not want us intermarrying with them. He does not want us intermarrying with those people. It has nothing to do with race or color. It has nothing to do with race or color. And so we've got to stop this nonsense telling people that they've got to divorce their wives because they married someone from a different so-called race. Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. Because you're going to be judged for every idle word that you speak. And it's a lie. It's a lie. He does not want us intermingling with heathen. If that person is not a heathen, if that person is walking in Torah and has the witness of Yahushua HaMashiach, then they are a fellow Yashar'AL. They have been engrafted into Yashar'AL and have become a fellow citizen of Yashar'AL. And that person does not have to divorce that person. They do not have to put that person away. Stop it with the lies and the hate. And if you're preaching that kind of hate, you're showing your fruit and you're showing that the love of Yahuwah is not in you. And if the love of Yahuwah is not in you, Yahuwah is not in you. He is not in you. Nevertheless, looking here at Dabarim, the 20th chapter, verse 10 through 18. Verse 10 through 18, line by line, precept by precept, here a little, there a little. Let Abba establish this truth. Dabarim 20, verse 10 through 18, reading beginning at verse 10, it reads, when you draw near to a city to fight against it, then you shall make a call for shalom to it. And it shall be that if it accepts your call for shalom and shall open to you, then all the people found in it are to be your compulsory labor and serve you. But if it does not make shalom with you and shall fight against you, then you shall besiege it, and Yahuwah your Elohim shall give it into your hands, and you shall strike every male in it with the edge of the sword. Listen, only the women and the little ones and the livestock and all that is in the city, all is spoil, you take as plunder for yourself. You take as plunder for yourself, and you shall eat the enemy's plunder, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you. Do so to all the cities which are very far from you, which are not of the cities of these nations. What nations? These 7 nations. 7 nations. The prohibition was only against those 7 nations. Do so to all the cities which are very far from you, which are not of the cities of these nations, those 7 nations. Only of the cities of these people, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you as an inheritance, you do not keep alive any that breathe. Of who? Of those 7 nations. But you shall certainly put them under the ban, which means to utterly destroy them. The Hittite, and the Amori, and the Canaanite, and the Perizzite, and the Hiwi, and the Yabuzi, as your Elohim has commanded you, lest they teach you to do according to all their abominations. Lest they teach you to do according to all their abominations, which they have done for their mighty ones, and you commit crime against Yahuwah, your Elohim. So we see here that the prohibition was only against those 7 nations again. It was not against those nations that were far off. It was not against those nations that were far off. Only against those 7 nations who were to be put under the ban because they were accursed, because they settled in a land that was not theirs in accordance with Jubilees, the 8th through the 10th chapter. Reading on here in Dabarim 21 now, verse 10 through 13. When you go out to fight against your enemies, and Yahuwah your Elohim shall give them into your hand, and you shall take them captive, and shall see among captives a woman fair of form, and shall delight in her, and take her for your wife. Then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head, and trim her nails, and put aside the mantle of her captivity, and shall dwell in your house, and mourn her father and her mother a month of days, and after that you shall go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. This has to do with the nations that were far off. It doesn't It does not fall on the 7 nations that were called to be put under the ban, but the nations that were far off, our ancestors were not forbidden from intermarrying with. Indeed, this is the text. This is not my opinion. These are not my words. This is the text, line by line, precept by precept, here a little, there a little. And so our ancestors, again, were only forbidden from mixing with the nations who were near, who had illegally occupied our land, the Kittite, the Amorite, the Canaanite, and the Perizzite, and the Kiwi, and the Yabuzite. These nations were to be put under the ban. They were not forbidden. They were not forbidden from mixing with all nations. And neither are we forbidden now. Neither are we forbidden now. Indeed, ever since YAHUAH'S, many years ago, when the Ruach, Abba began to pour out the Ruach upon all flesh, Yahuwah has been sending his Ruach to set up his sukkah in the hearts of men. The blood of Yahusha, it cleanses us. Who his blood has cleansed is no longer unclean. Who his blood has cleansed is no longer unclean. Moreover, whoever has the Ruach of Yahuwah are joined and related to each other by his Ruach. We are related. We are Ak and Akuf. We are brother and sister, related by the same father, related by the same Ruach, irrespective of race, nationality, color, or creed. We indeed have the same DNA coursing through us. We both have the same father, making us sister and brothers, irrespective of what color you are. Irrespective of what color you are. If we have the same root from the same father, we are sister and brothers because we have the same father. I don't care what you look like. And indeed, again, his people, we have mixed and mingled with every nation and tribe under the sun, and we look, we are scattered abroad to the 4 corners, and we have many different skin pigmentations and many different hair textures. You cannot discern who is Yashar'AL by their skin color, by the texture of their hair. You can only discern Yashar'AL by their fruit. By their fruit. And so, indeed, if we have the same father, if we share the same father, we are sisters and brothers. And like Adam married his sister, Kua, we too marry our sister when we marry someone with the same Kadush Ruach, irrespective of what color they are, irrespective of what color or so-called race or tongue. That said, one should still be careful not to mix with the heathen. Looking at Ezra 9, again, one should still be careful not to mix with the heathen. We do not mix with heathen. We do not mix with Torahless people. We do not mix with those who are committing abominations. We do not mix with those or marry those who are doing unclean things. We do not do it, irrespective of color or so-called race or tongue. I don't care what you look like, black, white, or brown. It does not matter. If you are not following Torah, if they are not following Torah and have the witness of Yahushua HaMashiach, then they're heathen. They're Gentiles. And you're not to mix with them. We're not to mix with them, irrespective of what color they are. As it is written in 2 Corinthians, the 6th chapter, verse 14 through 18. Do not become unevenly yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness and lawlessness? And what fellowship has light with darkness? And what agreement has Mashiach with wickedness? Or what part does a believer have with an unbeliever? And what union has the dwelling place of Elohim with idols? For you are a dwelling place of the living Elohim. As Elohim has said, I shall dwell in them and walk among them, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. Therefore come out from among them, and be separate, says Yahuwah, and do not touch what is unclean. And do not touch what is unclean. He says to come out from unbelievers, those who are Torahlessness, those who are heathen. He doesn't mention race here. He specifically says unbelievers. unbelievers. Those nations that we were forbidden from intermarrying with, were both unbelievers, but they were also put under the ban because they were accursed, because they had settled in a land that were not theirs. And do not touch what is unclean, and I shall receive you, and I shall be a father to you, and you shall be sons and daughters to me, says Yahuwah al Shaddai. Al Shaddai. Again, the blood of Yahusha cleanses us, and the root of Yahuwah makes us kin, irrespective of so-called race. And so if we have the same father, we have the same root, we are kin. We are related to one another. We are sister and brother, and irrespective of what color, nation, tongue, or tribe, we are related. And we're not forbidden from intermarrying with them. We're only forbidden from intermarrying with heathen, irrespective of their color. As we read here in Ma'asha, and we're going to set this down. Ma'asha, Acts, the 10th chapter, and I'm going to read verse 1 through 28. Now there was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a captain of what was called the Italian regiment, dedicated and fearing Elohim with all his household, doing many kind deeds to the people, and praying to Elohim always. He clearly saw in a vision about the 9th hour of the day, a messenger of Elohim coming to him, and saying to him, Cornelius. And looking intently at him, and becoming afraid, he said, What is it, master? And he said to him, Your prayers and your kind deeds have come up for a remembrance before Elohim. And now send men to Yafu, and send for Shamun, who is also called Kapha. He is staying with Shamun, a leather tanner, whose house is by the sea. And when the messenger who spoke to him went away, Cornelius called 2 of his household servants, and a dedicated soldier from among those who visited on him continually. And having explained to them all, he sent them to Yafu. And on the next day, as they were on their way and approaching the city, Kapha went up on the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And he became hungry and wished to eat. But while they were preparing, he fell into a trance, and he saw the Shamahim open, and a certain vessel like a great sheet, bound at the 4 corners, descended to him and let down to the earth, and which were all kinds of 4-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts and creeping creatures, and the birds of the Shamaim. And a voice came to him, Rise up, Kapha, slay and eat. But Kapha said, Listen, if you're a Christian listening, listen. But Kapha said, Not at all, master, because I have never eaten whatever is common or unclean. And so he makes the declaration here that he's never eaten something unclean. He's never eaten something unclean. But Abba wasn't talking about unclean foods here. He's talking about the Gentiles, the nations, whom the Yahudim considered unclean. And this is why they didn't associate with the nations, with the Gentiles, because they considered them unclean, or Toralists. They considered them unclean because they did not make a distinction between the clean and the unclean, because they were Toralists. Reading on. And a voice came to him again the second time. What Elohim has cleansed, you do not consider common. And this took place 3 times. And the vessel was taken back to the Shamaim. And while Kapha was doubting with himself about what the vision might mean, look, the men who had been sent from Cornelius, having asked for the house of Shamun, stood at the gate, and calling out, they inquired whether Shamun, also known as Kapha, was staying there. And as Kapha was thinking about the vision, the Ruch said to him, See, 3 men seek you, but rise up, go down, go with them, not doubting at all, for I have sent them. So Kapha went down to the men who had been sent to him from Cornelius, and said, Look, I am the one you seek. Why have you come? And they said, Cornelius, the captain of a righteous man. A righteous man. What is righteous? In accordance with Deuteronomy, Adabarim 6:25, if we are careful to obey his laws, statutes, and commandments, it will become righteousness for us. And so here Cornelius is exclaimed or described as being a righteous man, and one who reveres Elohim, To revere Elohim is to obey Elohim, to submit to Elohim, and well spoken of by the entire nation of the Yahudim. He was a Gentile. He was one of the nations. Was instructed by a Kadus messenger to send for you to the house and to hear words from you. So inviting them in, he housed them. And on the next day, Kaffa went away with them, and some brothers from Yafu went with him. And the following day, they entered into Caesarea, and Cornelius was waiting for them, having called together his relatives and close friends. And it came to be, and when Kaffa entered, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and bowed before him. But Kaffa raised him up, saying, Stand up, I myself am also a man. And talking with him, he went in and found many who had come together. And he said to them, You know that a Yahudi man is not allowed to associate with or go to one of another race. Go to one of another race. But listen, but Elohim has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Common or unclean. Later on in this chapter, the Ruch fell on Cornelius and his whole household, and Kaffa began to understand then what Abba was doing was that he was making now no distinction amongst the races against the nations, that he was impartial. He was impartial. He was not showing favoritism towards Yashar'AL anymore, but that he was going to pour out his Ruch upon all nations, thus making us related, thus making all nations related to him and joined to one another via his Ruch. And so we are not forbidden from intermarrying with someone who has the same Ruch and has the same father. Something else to consider here, Dabarim 23, verse 1 and 2, it reads here, He who is wounded by crushing of testicles or whose penis is cut off shall not enter into the community of Yahuwah. A mamza shall not enter the community of Yahuwah. Even a 10th generation of his shall not enter the community of Yahuwah. Who of us are not a mamza? Who of us are now being scattered amongst the nations, are not mixed? Who of us are, because we're here, most of us are here via the transatlantic slave trade, where the slave owners slept with a lot of our women, and so very few of us are any are pure Abraham now. Very few of us are any are pure Abraham. We are mixed. And so now, if we are not born from above, whereby having a DNA transplant, having the Father's Ruch placed in us, we are mamzas. And as it declares here, we can never enter the community of Yashar'AL as a mamza. And so we need to stop this. Many who are proclaiming this false doctrine are mamzas. And so I pray that after reading these precepts, that someone's eyes have been opened and someone's ears have been attuned to the truth and the love of Abba Yahuwah. Stop it. If that was so, if a mamza could not ever enter, and a mamza cannot ever enter, Timotheus could not have entered. He could not have entered. Timotheus had a Yashar'AL mother and a Greek father. But he was accepted. By all of the Yahudim. He was accepted. So looking here now, we're going to shut this down. Yeshayahu, Isaiah 56. I'm going to read verse 1 through 8. Looking as a precept to Deuteronomy 23, verse 1 and 2, and talking about mamzas, and talking about one whose testicles or whose penis is testicles are crushed, or whose penis is cut off, and how they should not enter the community of Yahuwah. Looking now at Yashar'AL, Isaiah 56, verse 1 through 8, it reads here, Thus says Yahuwah, guard right ruling, and do righteousness, for near is my deliverance to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Baruch is the man who does this, and the Son of Man who becomes strong in it, guarding the Shabbat, lest he profane it, and guarding his hand from doing any evil. And let not the son of the foreigner, who has joined himself to Yahuwah, speak, saying, Yahuwah has certainly separated me from his people. Nor let the eunuch say, we just read about this in Deuteronomy 23, 23rd chapter. Nor let the eunuch say, look, I am a dry tree. For thus said Yahuwah to the eunuchs who guard my Shabbat, and have chosen what pleases me, and are holding on to my covenant. To them I shall give in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than sons and daughters. And I give them an everlasting name that is not cut off. Also the sons of the foreigner who join themselves to Yahuwah, to serve him and to love the name of Yahuwah, to be his servants, all who guard the Shabbat and not profane it, and are holding on to my covenant. Them I shall bring into my Kadush mountain. Them I shall bring to my Kadush mountain, and let them celebrate in my house of prayer. Their ascending offerings and their slaughterings are accepted on my slaughter place, for my house is called a house of prayer for all the peoples. The Master Yahuwah, who gathers the outcasts of Yashar'AL, declares, I gather still others to him besides those who are gathered to him. Barak Yahuwah, Barak Yahuwah. So we have been given the important message, Yashar'AL, to be lights to the nations. To be lights to the nations, to take the Torah, to take the light of Torah to the nations, so that through us, his nation of Kahanim, his nations of priests, that we may call the rest of the sons of Adam, that we may reconcile, that Abba Yahuwah may reconcile the remnant of Adam, his firstborn son. This is what this is all about, because Yashar'AL represents the remnant of Adam, represents the remnant of mankind, so that, and this is why mankind has to engraft into Yashar'AL, because we represent the remnant of mankind, so they have to engraft. And so we have been given the very important mission of being lights to them, of speaking the Torah to them, teaching them Torah, and calling them out of darkness into its marvelous light, so that the remnant of mankind may be drawn out of darkness into its marvelous light, and so the remnant of mankind may be reconciled back to Yahuwah through us, that they too may receive his Ruach and become fellow family members and become fellow Yashar'alim, irrespective of color, nation, tribe, and tongue. There is one flesh of mankind. There is one flesh of mankind. And if they engraft into Yashar'AL and obey the Torah and acknowledge the Elohim of Yashar'AL and acknowledge that Yahusha has come and are immersed in his Kadush name, then they and receive his Ruach, then they are family members, irrespective of color, irrespective of race, irrespective of tongue. Barak Yahuwah, Barak Yahuwah, Barak Yahuwah. So I'm going to read one more text, and we're going to shut this down. I'm going to shut this down. And so the question is posed, should we divorce and put away spouses we married from other so-called races that we married before coming into truth? Now, I pray that that question has been answered. I pray that that question has been answered, that this false doctrine has been squashed once and for all. But I'm going to read one more text, and then we're going to shut this down. But the answer is no. The answer is no. The answer is no. Reading here in 1 Corinthians 7th chapter, verse 10 through 17, it reads here, beginning at verse 10, and to the married I command, not I, but the master. And to the married I command, not I, but the master, but Yahusha. A wife should not separate from a husband, but if she is indeed separated, let her remain unmarried, or be restored to favor with her husband, and let a husband not send away a wife. And to the rest I say, not the master. And to the rest I say, so these are his words. These are his words. These are not the words of the master. If any brother has an unbelieving wife, someone who is Torahless, who doesn't believe in Yahuwah, because if you believe in Yahuwah, you would keep his Torah. You would reverence him. You would reverence his words. If any brother has an unbelieving wife, and she thinks well to live with him, let him not send her away. And a woman who is an unbelieving husband, and he thinks well to live with her, let her not send him away. These words are kind of construed. You have to understand Torah. A woman can't send away a man. She can't send away a man. I'm not going to address that. Let me keep reading. I'm not going to address that right now. I pray that you have discernment to understand that some of these words, I'm not going to speak it right now. Let me read on. For the unbelieving husband has been set apart in the wife, and the unbelieving wife has been set apart, a kadush, in the husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but now they are kadush. And if the unbelieving one separates, let him separate himself. A brother or a sister has not been enslaved in such matters, but Elohim has called us to shalom. For how do you know, O wife, whether you shall save your husband? How do you know, O husband, whether you shall save your wife? Only as Elohim has distributed to each one, as the master has called each one, so let him walk, and so I order in all the assembly. So again, these are the words of Yashar'AL upon all. These are not the words of the master. If you're with an unbelieving wife, you don't have to put her away. That discretion is yours. You can put her away. That discretion is also yours, because that's in accordance with Torah. That is in accordance with Torah. And so we have to add balance to this text. We have to always stick with the foundation of Torah. And so, but I read that to show that just because you are married to someone from who is from a so-called other nation, when coming into truth, that you don't have to put them away, especially if they too are walking in truth. This has nothing to do with color. This has everything to do with whether or not they are heathen, in other words, someone who is Torahless, or if they are someone who keeps the practices that have been prescribed by Yahuwah our Elohim to keep. So I pray that this has been a barakah to you. I pray that it has been edifying. I pray that it has been enlightening. I didn't mean it to go this long, but this teaching had to go forth. In the meantime, until the next time, Yahuwah barak you and guard you. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahuwah lift up his face upon you and give you shalom. Thus you shall put my name on the children of Yashar'AL, and I myself shall barak them. So be it, so be it, so be it. Shalom.